Hi everyone! For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ariel. I'm currently doing my DMA at Rice and I did my undergrad and master's at Juilliard. And hopefully today I can answer some questions you guys have about audition season and applying to music schools. So this is kind of the type of room that your audition might be in. So usually you'll be standing outside in one of those these awkward places. An audition monitor who's gonna be like, all right, are you ready? And then you're like, no. And they open the door and you go in, yay, your audition. You know, this is not necessarily set up for an audition, but like the panel would be sitting like somewhere like there and you would walk up to the stage and play. So in all the auditions I've been in, I've seen anywhere from like 4 people on the panel up to 10. I feel like it really depends on the school. And of course the audition is about your playing mostly, but it's also like a first impression, right? So when you walk into your audition, try to be confident when you're walking, because if you're walking like this, which I always do, then, you know, the panel's kind of gonna get the impression like, oh, is she not ready? Is she like, you know? I always do this thing where I awkwardly bow while I'm walking into the room. I'm like, I don't know if I would necessarily suggest that, but I just do that. So it's definitely a good idea to greet them. They usually greet you first. They'll be like, hi, what will you be starting with? And you can be like, hi, like I'll be starting with so-and-so. I usually start my auditions with not Bach because my bow's like, so I didn't want to like start the audition and play like, so I usually start with concerto because that's a little bit more comfortable for me, but just pick whatever piece you feel the most comfortable starting with. I guess outfits are also important for auditions. You don't want to be like overdressed, like don't show up in a gown, but you definitely want to be dressed well. I just go with all black because it's just the most safe option. I feel like no one's gonna be offended by all black, although it's boring. But yeah, if you're different, I guess like for singers, it's a bit different. But most orchestral instruments and pianists, I think, just choose to go with all black. I also recently auditioned for a bunch of DMA programs, Doctor of Musical Arts, and that was like a whole different story. So skip to the second half of the video if you want to hear about my DMA audition experience. All right, let's go through some of these questions. I mean, I have like a bunch of them here, so I'll just go through all of them in order. Biggest difference between my master's audition and my DMA audition. So for your master's audition, there's a significant difference in rep. Like there's so much less than DMA. For my DMA audition, I mean, it does vary by instrument, but for violin specifically, we had so much rep. Like it was full concerto, full Bach, full sonata, like 2 Paganini caprices, a showpiece, a modern piece. I'm sure I'm forgetting something because it was just so much rep to work on. But for masters, it's significantly less. Very similar to bachelor's actually, except maybe full concerto and full Bach. I think that's the difference, but yeah. Another question we had was, there's so much rep, we have so much to prepare, what do they actually ask for? Most likely, they're not going to ask you to stop and then start somewhere else in the middle of the piece. So just prepare the beginnings, like exposition of all of your pieces really, really well. Of course, you should have everything prepared, but really focus on that. And I mean, some concertos, they might stop you in the beginning and then say, can you skip to the cadenza? If there's like a main cadenza section, of course, so always prepare your cadenzas. For all my violinists out there, practice your second movements of your concertos, your sonatas. Like they always ask for those. The third movement of your Bach. Practice that. Okay, next question. Did you know any of the people on the panel in the audition, and how many people are on the panel usually? So that also varies by school and by instrument. Personally, I did take trial lessons at a lot of the schools that I auditioned for. Not much for my bachelor's, but for my master's and DMA, I did take trial lessons because especially for DMA, it's a very, very long program, right? It's gonna be anywhere between 5 to 10 years. So you really wanna make sure that the professor that you're signing up for to be in the studio for the next 5 to 10 years is a really good match. So I would really suggest that anyone who's applying for DMAs to take trial lessons so that you can kind of get to know each other in advance and see if you'll be a good match for the studio. What happens if you make a mistake during your audition? So I actually have a story about this. So during my undergrad Juilliard audition, I did make a mistake during my solo Bach, which is what I started with. I had a huge memory slip. So I was playing the fugue and I went from the first page to like the last page, and I kind of just scooted my way. I improv'd my way back to the first page and I just kept going. And after I played, I kind of looked at the faculty and everyone was kind of laughing. So I felt really, really bad after that audition. I was like crying, but I got in. So when you make a mistake, don't panic. Just keep going if you can, like with the next thing. Or yeah, I think whatever you do, the most important thing is to just not stop completely, because when you stop, it's just like, because mistakes can happen in any setting, like during a performance as well. And you know, what they're looking for is how well you can manage that, and they could possibly give you more points if you manage it well. So just try not to panic, don't stop, keep going. Even if you have to restart a phrase, just go right ahead. And usually the panel is very understanding. They know you're under a lot of pressure, so just keep going. Another question I had was about scholarship and financial aid at conservatories. So I worked at the Juilliard admissions office for quite a long time, so I know all about this stuff. Usually there's a need-based scholarship, so financial aid, and there's also merit-based scholarship depending on how great your audition went and so on. So yeah, there are many options. And as an international student as well, you can receive a lot of scholarship. Yeah, so I think there's usually equal opportunity for both domestic and international students. How long did you get to rehearse with your pianist before your audition? So for most schools, they send out a list of pianists that you will be able to work with for your audition. And usually you have to reach out to them first, just letting them know this is my audition date and time, and would you be free to rehearse sometime before that. And that time is anywhere in the time frame of like a couple of days before the audition to the day of the audition. Sometimes I would fly in and have the audition on that same day and also have the piano rehearsal that morning and things like that. So it all depends on how you and your pianist's schedules work out. And don't forget to, when you're contacting your pianist, tell them your rep, ask them if they need music, you know, like just, they have so many people that they're playing for during auditions and it's really hard to keep track. So really make sure that you're the one who's responsible for, you know, telling them everything that they need to know. Are they blind auditions? Actually, none of the auditions I've ever been in was blind. I think usually orchestral auditions are blind, but not for college for some reason. How did you warm up right before your audition, and what did you do to stop being so nervous? So this is the age-old question, right? How to not be nervous during an audition, and there's no one right answer to this, obviously. So for my audition warm-up, I usually like to wake up a little bit earlier so that I can, you know, mentally prepare for the day. I do like to be at the audition venue at least an hour before so I can just like figure out what's going on. And usually they will have a warm-up room ready for you 30 minutes before your audition, so you can go in there and warm up. For warm-ups, I usually just did some open strings to open up my sound. But this is all, it depends on what you want to do, because for me, my biggest problem usually is tensing up my bow arm. So I played a lot of open strings for warm-ups. And then I just took turns starting each of my repertoire so that I can be ready, even if they ask for something a little bit unexpected, like second movements of things, then I just at least know that I can start it. And I'm a person who gets really, really nervous for auditions, especially. Not as much for performances, but auditions make me so nervous. And I think what worked the best for me is just to take deep breaths. Like nothing else, like the power pose, like anything, it doesn't work for me. But if I would just take a lot of deep breaths and try to do those breathing exercises, and I think that's what helped me the most, honestly. Also, right before audition season, me and my roommates did a lot of run-throughs for each other, so we just took turns playing for each other, and it was really hard to stay serious during this, but We try to emulate the audition experience as much as we could. Like we all like sat in a row on our couch and tried to look stern. But yeah, I think these run-throughs actually helped me so much to not feel too nervous during auditions. So whoever you can play for, your parents, your friends, anybody, just try to do that as much as you can before the audition season. Okay, on to DMA questions. So for DMA applications, it is quite a different process than any of the other degrees that I've applied to in the past. You guys probably already went through all of this if you're watching this now in January, but in the application process, there's a lot more to submit, right? Like you're writing samples and everything. There are two separate parts to your live audition, one being the interview and one being the actual playing part. Usually the two are completely separate. For me, I did take my auditions during COVID, so a lot of it was through Zoom, and in some schools, like I remember CIM or Oberlin, I don't remember which one, but they did ask a few questions during the actual audition as well. So some of the questions that they could ask in an interview, it's very similar to any other job interview, I think. They would ask things like, why do you want to come to our school to pursue a DMA? Why do you want a DMA? Like, why would you be a valuable asset to our school? Some schools also asked for any like possible dissertation topics that we might be interested in if we do get into our DMA program. And yeah, it's generally about your goals of why you're pursuing a DMA and what you want to do with that degree and so on. So the DMA entrance exams were really, really different for each school. So just to go over a few of them. So out of the schools that I've applied to, schools like MSM and USC were very essay-based. So they had a certain topic that you just have to write essays for during the time limit. Other schools like Rice and Yale were a little bit more extensive. So the exams were much, much longer in length as well. Like each section took hours. There was a separate theory and history exam. So for Yale, I know that their diagnostic exams are actually online, so you can kind of take a look at a sample exam and just kind of practice. And I would recommend really going through that because it's not just Yale. The Rice exams were very similar to that as well. So the exams consisted of a few different parts, one of them being listening and score ID. So there would be like listening examples and score examples where you have to identify the piece and explain kind of when the piece was composed, etc. There were also some parts that was just defining vocab, but I think most of the exam was just writing. They were either paragraph answers or essay questions, and just have to write. I know it's really hard to study for DMA exams because each school has such a different exam and no one really specifies what will actually be on the test. So what I did was focus on the history aspect because I felt like that was what I was lacking the most. The theory part, I think, is a lot of stuff that we already know and use in our daily life, so it was a little bit easier. But for history, there's a lot of memorization. So I really suggest that you go through different eras that you're not too familiar with. For me, that era was Baroque and Renaissance and modern. I think things in between I was a little bit more familiar with. So I really just reviewed those, like the chants, those things. Some textbooks that I used and all of my colleagues used to study for this was like Norton, the anthologies and the textbooks. I also did some of the worksheets in the Late's theory textbook to kind of remind myself with the harmonic analysis and things like that. And for the DMA interview, I think the most important thing to know is just how to sell yourself. Because as I mentioned before, it's like any other job interview. You want to show why you will be a good candidate to this program. So really know your strengths and kind of show your passion for whatever reason you're applying for your DMA. For me, it was teaching, and I really tried to show how much I love teaching and all of my experiences with teaching and my future goals. 한번 소개해주세요.
네, 저는 서울대학교에서 학부를 했고 그리고 맨하탄 음대에서 석사를 졸업하고 지금 라이스에서 박사 하고 있습니다.
오케이. 한국에서 오디션 보셨을 때랑 미국에서 보셨을 때랑 약간 오디션장 분위기가 뭐가 달랐는지.
일단 그 뭐죠? 블라인드 테스트여서 막 선생님들이랑 따로 막 얘기를 하거나 뭐 인사를 하거나 이럴 필요가 전혀 없고 그냥 되게 그냥 연습실에서 하던 차림 그대로 가서 그대로 그냥 편하게 치고 나오는?
그럼 아예 드레스업도 안 해도 됐겠네.
그냥 막 양말 신고 하는 애들도 있고 맨발로 막 하는 애들도 있고 진짜 그냥 편한 옷 그냥 연습실처럼. 그래서 되게 그냥 부담이 조금 덜한 느낌인 것 같고 미국은 다 오픈돼 있고 교수님들이 너무 이렇게 딱 보이니까.
맞아요. 근데 그런 큰 홀에서 했어요, 미국에서? 아니면 뭐 클래스룸 그런 느낌?
뭐 학교 이름 얘기해도 되나? 뭐 막 인디애나 같은 경우는 석사 시험 볼 때는 그냥 되게 클래스룸 같은 데서 바로 선생님들 옆에 앉아 계시고 했는데 박사 시험은 또 되게 홀 같은 데서 받고 나머지 학교들도 웬만하면 다 홀에서 봤던 것 같아요.
그럼 패널엔 한 몇 명 정도 앉아 계세요, 보통?
학교마다 다른데 뭐 미시간 같은 경우는 교수님이 3분밖에 없어가지고 3분이 계시고 맨하탄 같은 경우도 거기는 선생님들이 되게 많아가지고 한 뭐 6분?
오,
이렇게
맨하탄
앉으셨던
되게
것
많다.
학교마다 되게 차이 많은 것 같아요. 그 라이스는 우리는 그 줌으로 시험 봤어가지고
그거 너무 어색했다.
진짜 근데 선생님 되게 많았어.
근데 그 인터뷰가 특히 이렇게 딱 들어가니까 완전 많았죠.
엄청 선생님들 많고 그리고 우리는 약간 피아노를 20분 치고 10분 정도 인터뷰 해가지고 되게 피아노 치고 정신없는 상태에서 막 덜덜덜덜 이상한 질문 막 하시고 막 약간 그랬던 기억이.
그럼 박사 시험 이제 공부는 어떻게 하셨는지? 공부를 하긴 하셨는지?
근데 사실 박사 시험을 저는 공부 시험 보는 데를 여기랑 라이스랑 맨하탄이랑 예일 이렇게만 공부 시험을 봤던 것 같은데
예일 진짜 어려웠죠. 라이스랑 예일이 진짜 최고로
다 어려워. 막 아는 게 많이 없어가지고 그냥 있는 지식을 기반으로 막 벼락치기 그 공부를 살짝 해서 그 그라우트 서양음악사 그거 앞부분 조금 보고 뭐 이상한 소리 열심히 하다 나왔는데 사실 왜 붙었는지 아직도 모르겠고.
근데 그 시험이 왜 맨하탄이랑 라이스랑 예일이랑 다 좀 되게 달랐잖아요. 근데 라이스랑 예일은 좀
맞아, 좀
그죠?
비슷한 느낌?
에세이 많이 쓰고 근데 그것도 있잖아요. 뭐죠? 그 리스닝 스코어 아이디
듣고 막 이거 막 차이점 쓰는 거 이런 것도 있었고.
근데 확실히 그 공부가 약간 그냥 그 바로크, 레네상스 이때 위주로 해야 되는 것 같아요.
맞아. 그게 되게 많았던 것 같아요.
그리고 그게 제일 우리가 모르는
제일
건데
어려워.
그게 제일 많이 나와.
맞아.
그 이유는 그냥
근데 되게 현대도 생각보다 많이 나왔어.
맞아.
Alright, thanks for watching everyone. I hope I answered some questions. If you have any more questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll try to answer them as soon as I can.
Good luck.